Hi guys, and welcome back to the Peculiar Place podcast. I'm Jessii, and I'm here with Ty.
How's it going?
Usually Mandy says that part, so I'm never used to it.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have like a tagline or a slogan that I can say right at the beginning.
It's all good. Sorry guys that we missed last week. I was on a Mother's Day trip with my sister and my mom. It was a delayed Mother's Day trip just because things were crazy this month, so we had to go away a little later. And then Ty and I went to Sudbury in the same week, so it was just a really, really busy week. And the reason why Mandy's not here is because they just moved this past week, so we've been helping them out there, and they moved quite far, so it's not like a simple sort of turnaround. It's going to take quite a while.
No, it was a solid about, I think, 10 hours we did just a few days ago, and that was just to move one truck.
One truck, yeah.
One truckload took that long.
It's been crazy, and then imagine that with a newborn on top of it. Like, it's...
I mean, it looked like you were having fun.
Well, I was holding the baby while they were working, and I'm fine with that.
Luca and I, and both your dad and Luca's dad, are struggling to lift like these massive old-fashioned wooden furniture pieces all throughout the house. I feel like you had the best end of the bargain. I did.
I don't complain. But Mandy should be here next week. And speaking about like filming podcasts, we do have a bit of an update, and it's kind of a downer, and I feel, well, my voice just cracked. Did you hear that? Yeah. Am I that nervous to talk about this update?
Yeah, I think you are a little bit. It's not the best news in the world. Nothing grave by any means, but I'll let Jessii take it away here.
Yeah, so you guys know we started this podcast back in September, and this is episode 31. I think so. Something like that.
I go by basically the sheet of paper that is usually sitting in front of us. When I was cleaning out the studio today, you usually leave the script behind. And last one said 30, so I think it's 31.
I think it's 31.
I hope so.
We've been doing this for almost a year. So by the first week of this coming September, it'll be a year that we've been doing the podcast. And I have to admit, like, I had really high hopes for this podcast, and don't get me wrong, like, this has been so much fun. This has been something that Mandy and I especially have been wanting to do for a very long time, and I feel so grateful and fortunate that we've been able to get a set in place and get all the equipment that we needed and have been able to do it for so long. So I'm really grateful for that, and for you guys for listening and tuning in every week, and for commenting and for engaging, and to our patrons, of course. But unfortunately, it's not doing as well as we hoped in the span of time that we've been filming, right? It's been almost a year, and our videos, I think, they sit around 2,000 views, which, listen, like I said, grateful for those 2,000 people, but we were hoping for more growth. I mean, Mandy and I, and you watch podcasts all the time, and you can see how quickly their channels grow and how many viewers they get, and it seems to be rapid fire, and for some reason for us it hasn't been that way. So that's a little bit disappointing, because we were hoping for quicker growth. And so because of that, we really had to sit down and think, like, how sustainable is this? Right? It's been a year. Do we want to finish off the year and maybe reevaluate in September? And the answer to that is yes, we are going to go to September, but we've had to make some changes. So to manage this podcast, Ty has been editing, and he's a great editor. We're so grateful for him.
Well, I mean, I try my best. I'd say we're okay at it.
No,
There's been a lot of hiccups.
You're really good. And it takes a lot more work than you think to get a podcast edited from all the different mics and audio sources and different cameras and adding in pictures and exporting different things. It takes forever. It takes Ty, I would say 2 to 3 days to get a podcast done, and then another day on top of it to do all of our shorts and stuff. So it's almost a full-time job for Ty. And this is where the awkward part comes in. It's always strange to talk about, like, monetary things and stuff, but you guys know that content creating is my full-time job, right? Like, out of college, I was going to go into graphic design, and this has become my full-time job. So we do have to be cognizant of where our time is being put. And so just to be totally transparent, we make $100 to $200 a podcast. It's awkward to talk about, but we're not making any big income from this, and Ty is not being paid for his time. Mandy and I both, we now have, well, we've always had an hour commute to the studio. Mandy now is going to have over an hour commute to the studio. So there and back, it's a lot of driving. And so I guess what I want to say is that like the money we have coming in from the podcast really only pays for the rental space, if that.
Yeah.
So it's really not sustainable. I would love for it to be. I would love for it to be a hobby, but it takes too much time in the week. So I would like to set some goals here, okay? Mm-hmm. We would love to continue the podcast after September, but I think we would have to gain larger views, but I think we would have to hit 300 patrons. And I think that's a realistic goal.
It can be, you know? Absolutely.
Right now we have 30. And I love you guys. And I'm so grateful for you. So thank you. But I think if we're going to continue, we have to hit 300. And by the way, on Patreon, it says we have more, but those aren't paid patrons. Those are like, I guess, people who are following the page.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
It throws a bunch of numbers at you. And it's a fun little juggle to filter out and make sure you see exactly what's going on the back end of things.
Yeah.
But from what we can tell, it's 30.
So if we can hit 300 by September 1st, we will continue the podcast for another year. The other change that we have to do for this moment in time is we have to cut the podcast time in half. So instead of doing an hour to an hour and a half, we're going to have to do 30 minutes, just so it takes half the time for Ty to edit. We can film 2 podcasts back to back while we're traveling to the studio. Mm-hmm. It just makes things a little bit easier for us. I mean, it's not a great update, but I think the positive thing is that we are going to continue until September, because we were thinking maybe we'll stop now. We're going to continue.
We've had a lot of meetings behind the scenes, and it's not just us that you see in front of the cameras. There's other people in our business, Jessie's parents. They help us run through the numbers with everything. Yeah. And we love doing this, and we appreciate the support that everyone who has been here for us has given us, even just simply watching, liking, commenting, or even listening in on whatever your preferred service is a huge, huge help to us.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. We see you guys and we appreciate you.
That's the other thing.
We do. We're not complaining saying it's anybody's fault. It's not.
No.
The internet is a fun game that we all play. We just have to look at the numbers that we see. How can we get it to a place where it is sustainable? Because at the end of the day, it's a very cold world business, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we have to be realistic. Yes. It takes a lot of time out of everybody who's a part of this podcast to get it done. And we want to compensate everybody who is here for their time.
Yeah. No one's getting paid right now.
No. And I do love editing the podcast. I love seeing you and your guests come on, talk about silly things. I learn a lot about you.
I know.
Probably things that I shouldn't be
my
learning.
Secrets coming out on this podcast.
Yes. I am probably up there with some of the super fans when it comes to this podcast, because I know everything, because I've had to watch it over about 4 times for each podcast when I go through it.
Yep.
As we said, we don't want to say that it's anybody's fault. It's not. We appreciate the support that we had. We're just making steps to try and make it as sustainable as possible. And we hope we can meet those goals, because we want to be able to provide this content for you guys, because we love making it. Mm-hmm. And we surely hope that you guys love listening to it, watching it. So.
I love the podcast. Honestly, it's felt like the most me, over all of my platforms. I just feel like I can be super, super honest and open here. Partly because I have an older audience watching, so I don't feel as, censored. Like, I don't have to hold back as much, so I feel more myself on this podcast, and it's been a really great outlet for me.
So what Jessie is saying is basically when the cameras go off, we're swearing like sailors and just running around, just committing so much debauchery.
Totally.
So much.
Anyways, though, guys, that is just the update. I just wanted to be real with you guys, so you're not wondering why all of a sudden we're cutting the podcast time in half. But like I said, this will only be temporary until September if we can get to 300 patrons. I believe in us, and I really appreciate the support. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to give a little hint for this week's clip. We are talking about really creepy missing persons cases in today's podcast, weird things that search and rescue officers have found in the forest. forest. And so because of that, I thought that we would kind of talk about missing persons cases or strange things like that from our lives. And Ty's mom used to be a police officer, so she had a couple really disturbing and sad cases that were cold cases.
We had a conversation with her actually on the way here today because we were just thinking about it. And the first thing she says is like, oh, but they didn't end well. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these situations don't end well. We hope that any of them currently ongoing do end well. Yeah, you're in for some very dark stories, and also some of them from our lives as well.
Right. You guys probably remember how I did kind of a series on my best friend who went missing when I was in high school. And there were some things that I kept out on YouTube because, like I said, it's a younger audience and YouTube is pretty strict about what you can and can't say. And I also kind of had a conclusion to her story that I found out 2 years ago that I just didn't mention on YouTube. It didn't feel appropriate, and it didn't feel like something I should put out there for views. And so I feel like Patreon is a smaller community, and it just feels like a kind of more comfortable spot to talk about this. So
well, in the authoritarian regime of YouTube, you're not allowed to say very much, but in the lawless wasteland of Patreon,
you can do
where
anything.
Our patrons are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
there's no rules.
Exactly. So if you want to see this week's clip there on our personal missing persons cases, we'll link it down below, or check out patreon.com/peculiarplacepodcast. Also, if you're in the peculiar tier, yes. That's the tier, right? That's
you have been mixing up the tiers every single time you talk about it.
So the $20 tier, as you know, we've made a bit of a change, and every single month you're actually going to get a small item from our retail store mailed to you, which is so cool. And so this week's item is our pop sockets, and we'll put a picture up because these are really small to show on the camera. But the background is the Aurora Borealis, and then we have the fairy wings that I designed on top of it, and they are so cute. They're purple and green. So you'll get those along with a little sort of note that I personally write for each patron if you're in that tier. So yeah.
I don't even get notes.
You don't even get notes.
No.
My patrons get notes.
So lucky you. Lucky you, peculiar tier members.
Thank you guys once again for supporting us. And yeah, we're going to move on to our little topics here. Life updates? Do you have a life update? You got an MRI.
Yeah, so during all of this craziness that's been going on, we only really talk about the fun stuff that we're generally doing during our life updates.
Right.
For the most part. Jessii has obviously been going through a lot of health concerns, and I myself have been going through a few strange ones as well. I've been trying to lose a little bit of weight, and during that time I've been feeling really dizzy, and I was thinking, maybe, it's just the food. It's persisted for a month. I've been extremely dizzy. It got to the point where I couldn't exercise anymore, and I was thinking, this really isn't good, especially anything going on with my head, because anybody who's seen our vlogs before knows that about 3 years ago, Jessii was noticing there was something strange happening with my eyes specifically. One pupil was dilating huge and the other one was really small. And I was dealing with headaches, and I've had migraines my entire life, so I was thinking, it's probably that. Fun fact about me, and people on the vlog channel probably already know this, my brother and I were each born with an extra set of sinuses. Mine are right behind my eyes and actually push one of them that way. I joke that that's my drinking tell, because as soon as those muscles start relaxing, my one eye starts going the other way. Yeah. That's why I wear glasses usually. We investigated stuff, and we had a CT scan, and there's nothing scarier than when your doctor says, do you want me to tell you this, or do you want a nurse to tell you this? And
she also said, are you driving? Do you want to pull over?
Yeah.
And so we're like, oh my gosh,
this was during our anniversary trip when we heard about this, and they said they found something on my brain. So that, of course, scares the crap out of me. We're going to jump right in before anybody makes any conclusions. It's not the big C word.
It's benign.
Okay. Yeah. It's benign, whatever it is. And so we had an MRI. They investigated it, and apparently I have a cyst on my brain that is kind of on top of the area of your brain that kind of controls your sleep-wake cycle.
Right.
So I don't sleep well. That probably explains a little bit of it. We found that out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So as soon as this stuff started happening, the dizziness and all that stuff, I'm thinking, oh no, please tell me that this benign thing didn't become something malignant.
Or grow or something.
Or grow or whatever. So called my doctor. And I usually like the approach of let's scratch off the scary things first.
Yeah.
And then figure out the lesser things later, because once the scary thing's off your plate, you feel a little bit better. I go in, get an MRI, and the past, week of waiting for these results have been nerve-wracking because I don't know if this thing has grown or what. Thankfully, we got the results. Hasn't grown. But they said, we did find something else, though. It's like, oh, of course. I have polyps in my sinuses, and they said that could actually be explaining the dizziness that I've been dealing with because your sinuses connect to what I believe is called, it's eustachian tubes or something.
Your ear tube.
My ear tubes. There's tubes in your ears that usually, if they get blocked with something, they can cause dizziness because, fun fact of the day, your inner ear actually kind of controls your balance. If things are all wonky up in there, you'll be wiggling everywhere.
Yep.
But they said, yeah, you got polyps in your sinuses. They could be pressing against your ear tubes. Here, have this nose spray and you'll feel better. But that's what we've been dealing with, going between hospitals and doctor's appointments, in between all the fun stuff with work and your trips. So
yeah, but I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad it's not, the brain thing getting bigger, and it's something that's treatable.
It could be a worm, just a big worm.
I would hope not.
They just start poking out every now and then.
That reminds me of Corpse Bride. Doesn't she have like a little green worm that sticks out of her eye?
I don't know. See, my brain went immediately to Futurama,
okay,
where a guy had like a bunch of brain parasites, but they actually started making him smarter.
What?
So
I mean,
yeah, that's pretty much my update. What about you?
I don't really have any updates aside from saying, don't get your wisdom teeth out. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But also don't. Okay, so we're going to get into some trending topics. Oh, do you know what's funny? I put in my notes 2 weeks ago, you and I went to a restaurant. We went to the Keg, and we noticed something strange.
Yeah, it's not strange, Jess. This is the new norm.
No, it's strange.
It's the new norm.
Okay, we're millennials, okay?
We're old now, Jess. You know how your parents just said, I don't understand what these youngins are doing these day and ages?
Yes.
Like, I remember my parents would tell me to go outside when I got older because I'd just be sitting there on the Xbox just mindly twiddling away and all that stuff. It's like when I was your age, I was walking up and down the streets to go to my friends, uphill both ways because, those stories, it always is, and they're always somehow trudging through 6 feet of snow. We're at that point now.
Yeah.
Because we did some people watching at the restaurant.
So everyone has phones nowadays, right? Especially those Gen Zs. It's kind of sad because...
It's like that one right now that Jessii never lets go.
Right, but I'm a millennial, and I read most of the time, okay? People were upset that my pinky was weird. Okay, listen, when I posted that short of me having iPhone pinky, all of these angry men were like, wow, she must be boring because she must never put her phone down. And it's like, I read too, and guess where my book sits? Right here.
And guess where your phone sits? Right next to the book.
Right, but I read more than I'm on my phone. Anyways, so we go out to dinner. We go to the Keg, okay? It's just a little date night. Ty and I, even though we work together and live together, we always have something to talk about somehow, even though we see each other 24/7.
How's work?
Right, even though, we work together.
I ask you if your coworker is still bothering you.
Right.
Does he keep saying inappropriate things to you during work hours?
He does sometimes.
He does.
So anyway, the waiter sits another couple down beside us, the table directly beside us, and they're clearly younger. I would say they're probably 20. They're a good decade younger than us.
Jess, I'm pretty sure they were still in their teens.
Didn't they order wine?
No. They just got water.
Okay, they were 18, 19, 20, okay? In that range.
This is what my assumption was of the situation. This was their first date, and this was like a high school date. I don't know which one was probably the one to initiate it. Based on, my personal biases, I think the guy was trying to pull out the stops.
Yeah.
And Jessii will explain what was happening after the fact.
Who goes to a steakhouse in high school?
A guy trying to impress somebody.
Clearly, because I couldn't afford anything in high school, but
neither could I.
Listen, okay.
But hey,
I mean, if you want to have a date
there. You
take
those extra shifts at your summer job to afford that one Keg date.
Right. So anyway, they're sitting there, and this is not an exaggeration, and you guys don't even understand how much I wanted to record them the whole time, which sounds creepy, which is why I didn't. Okay, but I wanted people...
Yeah, recording children in public is very creepy,
I'm pretty sure they were 18. But
I don't think they were.
I don't know. It's hard to tell these days, isn't it? Anyway, we're sitting there. They were on their phone like this, right up to their face, the entire dinner.
Well, they're sitting there. The guy was just like...
And the girl was like this.
For anybody who's listening right now, you probably have no idea what we're doing.
Okay, so Ty's on his phone, down at his lap, and I'm on my phone right in front of my face. They did not speak, aside to order whatever food they were ordering. They did not speak to each other. They were on their phone the whole time, the whole hour and a half.
Maybe they were texting each other.
What? That's crazy to me. Ty and I were looking at each other and like looking over at them like and like talking internally, like saying like, what the heck is this about?
Well, I was tempted just to walk over to one of them and say, what's your favorite hobby? And if they actually answered, I'd say, great, tell them that.
I guess it's just such a sad sight to see that this is where we are now, where like, even if you're going on a date, and we don't know if it was their first date, they could have been a couple, but even so, the entire hour and a half, you don't say a word to each other and you're on the phone.
Nerves could play a factor in this. If people are anxious, I understand that. But believe me, as somebody who does suffer with nerves, anxiety, all that stuff, it doesn't get better when you hide behind a screen.
That would make me more anxious, the fact that there was like this awkward silence.
We can also think of it in this way too. Maybe both of them going out with each other, if this was a first date, realizing that neither of them would talk to one another. Yeah, it sucks. You know, you take this time out of your day for both of them. But maybe they looked at each other after this situation and said, man, we're really dodging a bullet with each other at this point. Because if you're not going to engage at all, either of you, they're both probably thinking, yeah, forget about this. Let's move on.
I think the only thing that would make sense is if they were brother and sister.
But why would you go to the keg?
I don't know.
As a brother and sister?
I don't know.
Just the two of you?
Anyways, though, we sound really judgmental, but if you guys were there, you would understand that no exaggeration, not a peep came from them the entire dinner, and they were just texting on their phone the whole time. It was crazy.
As I said, Jess, we're the next generation of the people not understanding what the kids are doing these days.
But, like, you can put down your phone for literally an hour dinner. It's not that hard. Eat your food. Ask each other what's been going on in your life. Talk. Like, just talk. Like, it's so sad that a screen is, like, what our eyesight sees the entire day.
We do pull out our phones, but that's generally to look on our FurboCam and take screenshots of our dogs.
Right.
Because our little guy, Tumnus, is usually rolling around in his crate all day, and he usually makes pretty funny faces at the camera.
Right. Okay, so we're going to move on to this phenomenon that I found out about through TikTok, because that seems to be the place that most conspiracies and interesting things come from these days.
Whenever you say phenomenon, I always take it with a grain of salt, just because you've explained regular people's jobs as a phenomenon.
I think the word phenomenon has now taken different forms, and it doesn't just mean a natural...
I think phenomenon is like the Northern Lights.
That is.
Not a storm chaser.
It has now taken on a new meaning, and this phenomenon has to do with Spongebob, okay? We all watch Spongebob.
So
we all love Spongebob.
Like a strange correlation between people who watch SpongeBob and something terrible that happens?
No.
Okay, then how is it a phenomenon?
Okay.
Is it just an episode?
Let me explain. Everyone has collectively agreed that the end credits for Spongebob is terrifying. Now, this might sound weird at first, okay?
Is that why I don't remember it? Because maybe my brain just blocked it out?
Yeah. PTSD, SpongeBob credits.
I have PTSD, but I'm pretty sure it's not from that show.
Okay. So people have been saying that as they're listening to it and watching it, it makes them feel empty. Okay? It almost has like a liminal space sort of feel. Like that feeling you get when you're like in an empty room or you're in a familiar place that doesn't seem right. And so I heard this phenomenon and I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. So, of course, I went onto YouTube and I looked up the SpongeBob end credits. And it's kind of just like bubbles floating around with the words going up. And it's kind of like a weird sort of elevator music, SpongeBob music. You know the music that's like... Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, it sounds happy.
Right, but like, you know when there's happy music in strange places? You know how horror movies...
on like your playlist with all of like your funeral music?
Yeah, my Bon Iver. You know in horror movies now how they're using fun, upbeat music for scary scenes?
Well, usually because those fun, upbeat songs, like with the lyrics, incredibly dark.
Right, but it's like kind of fun sounding music. I guess people are kind of attributing that.
It's like my favorite kind of music, the stuff that sounds really upbeat, but the lyrics are horribly dark.
Anyway, I went and I watched these credits, and it did make me feel strange. I wasn't scared. I wasn't terrified,
but I just feeling strange because you're reliving like part of your life of watching SpongeBob again?
Maybe it's like a nostalgia thing. I don't know, because nostalgia can make you feel sad and weird, I guess.
Yeah.
But people are saying that they remember when they were a kid and the episode would end, they would quickly try and change the channel or turn off the TV before the credit scenes come up. And I don't think I ever did that when I was a kid. But
I mean, I never just liked watching credits in general because it was boring.
Well, yeah, who does, really?
Was that not the reason? Maybe because it's like, okay, we need to find the next bit of of entertainment or something.
Or were we just sad that SpongeBob was over?
Maybe.
I don't know. But I would encourage you to go watch the end credit scenes and see if you feel that emptiness. Because I kind of did.
I don't know. Like, I didn't remember what the imagery was on the end credits. I always thought it was like the strange, like, flower print. And
yeah,
stuff
I think
like
it was
that.
flower print and like kind
because
of.
I remember having like a bathing suit that had that flower print on it.
You had a SpongeBob bathing suit?
Well, I have SpongeBob underwear now because you got it for me.
You know what? We just said that no end credits are interesting, but there is that one Harry Potter movie of Marauders. Is that how you say it?
Marauders.
How do you say it?
Marauders.
Marauders map. Where
the Marauders map.
Where you can see all the footprints like going around, and there's that like one where they're in a closet. There's 4 footprints.
Set up in a very,
inappropriate way.
Inappropriate way.
Yeah.
But yes, that's just because the editors like to put something funny in there every now and
then. But I love that because we actually sit and we watch those credits.
Well, it's because it's at least visually interesting.
And I don't feel empty. I feel full because Harry Potter is amazing.
I was going to say, so do the people in the closet.
Ew.
Nice.
Oh my gosh. You see what I mean? How this is so different from my YouTube channel?
It is. But also, this is what she deals with on a daily basis.
Okay, I found this disgusting fact out also on TikTok. See, I scroll through TikTok at night and I find out all of these really scary things.
See, I always like try and cuddle up next to you because I want to see some funny things. But then you always present to me like these incredibly dark or sad things. What do you do on TikTok?
How many times do I walk over to you in our house and I'm crying because of a video I saw on TikTok?
Stop watching the sad stuff.
I just found out that Peter the Peacock was killed by a coyote, and he would entertain all of the old people at the old people's home. They would go out with their tea and their coffee.
This story, though incredibly specific, is also incredibly vague because you're not saying where it is. And it's just the old people.
I don't know
all
where.
All of them collectively.
I don't know.
The one old people house.
But it was,
as you say, not retirement home, the old people house.
It was so sad because all of these older women were being interviewed and they were holding Peter the Peacock's feathers because that was all that was left of him. And they were crying and they were like, we used to love to see him out in the gardens. And then that coyote came around and took him.
That sounds like a plot to like a Looney Tunes sketch.
But you don't understand. Like, I was bawling. I came into the kitchen and I'm like...
Was the coyote doing this when, rubbing his hands, plotting?
It's not
from the
funny.
bushes?
It's not funny. It is so sad. And
I know
was crying.
It's sad. The stuff that I'm poking fun at is just this reaction happens on a nearly daily basis. Is you always come in feeling horribly sad about something that is very much unrelated to what we're doing. You'll be sitting there working or just reading and you're bawling and I'm like, did you read a sad book? It's like, no, the peacock.
Yeah, it's very sad. I'm very emotional.
I don't know.
So this is a fact that I heard. Bugs like to go into our ears at night because it's moist and warm, and they usually crawl out before you wake.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was this doctor who, I think it was an ENT actually, who frequently takes bugs and small things out of ears, more than you would think. He says bugs are in people's ears all the time.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
But he was saying that, like, you in your lifetime have probably had hundreds of little bugs crawl into your ear and then come out again. While you're sleeping, because it's dark and warm and probably nice. A nice little bed for the bugs to sleep in.
that are in your eyebrows?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
We have mites on our face.
Yeah. If people have a lot of them in their eyebrows, in a certain light, you can actually see them jumping off.
Ew. And also your eyelashes have little bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
That's so gross.
We are absolutely covered in microorganisms.
Ew.
Like, our entire bodies are an ecosystem.
Yeah, I know.
And believe me, you need those creatures on you.
Speaking of creatures... Taylor Momsen, she's a little girl.
She's a creature?
No. Well, some people might say so. No, I love her. So Taylor Momsen was the little girl in The Grinch, right? Grown up. She was also in Gossip Girl. She is now like a metal rock singer.
Good on her.
And she's really cool. The long, straight blonde hair, the crazy, like, black, skimpy outfits. I mean, that's her brand, right? So she was on stage doing her concert, and the audience started pointing at her and, like, yelling something, and she couldn't understand. And she was like, everyone's pointing at me, and I don't know why. And, like, so she's, like, walking around. Well, in the video that people were taking, you can see that a bat had latched onto her thigh because she was wearing a tiny, tiny mini skirt. And this bat, this brown, fuzzy bat, was, like, sucked onto her thigh as she was performing.
Yeah, and that's terrifying.
she like finally looked down and she was like, oh my gosh, and she started freaking out, and the security and everyone had to come on stage to try and get the bat off. And then she kept performing, but people were like, get a rabies shot, like they were screaming that at her.
So what they should have done is, yes, get the bat off. You don't want a bat on you.
Yeah.
They have very small teeth. You're not going to feel it really if they bite you.
How did she not? That's what I don't get.
You don't feel it.
But I understand maybe the bite.
Incredibly lightweight.
But its hand, like it was wrapped around her thigh.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Bats are very lightweight. I know this because I've handled them before. Always wear gloves. You got to be really careful. Very small teeth. You catch the bat and you send it off for testing.
Yeah.
Because they're unfortunately carriers for a lot of very nasty diseases that
rabies.
They themselves might not exhibit.
Right.
But they can be tested for.
Yeah.
I know my mom who listens to these podcasts. She is an advocate to get the animals tested because rabies shots are brutal, incredibly brutal. And if you can avoid having one, you might want to have that chance. But if the bat comes back positive, there's no avoiding it. Get it.
Well, people were saying that she shouldn't have even finished the show because, like, essentially once you get a symptom of rabies, you're 99% going to die.
Yeah. You got to get that stuff tested, quarantined, all that stuff.
But I don't think she realized.
It takes a while for it to, and when I say a while, not like 30 minutes or anything like that. It depends
where you're bitten, too.
It does.
If it's on your foot, it's going to take longer.
But usually they quarantine animals and stuff like that for like a 24-hour period just to see if they start doing, like, showing any symptoms.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to get that stuff tested immediately.
So anyways,
it actually happened to one of my mom's friends recently, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Her son was just out working. A bat came and latched onto his, like, basically head and neck.
Yeah.
One of the worst spots to get bit. But they were able to catch it, sent it off for testing. It came back all clear. Get that stuff tested. I cannot be any more serious than I am right now. I know my tone doesn't change at all. This is my serious tone.
Yeah.
But yes, you want to be careful about that.
Well, she did go get a rabies shot because she posted on her Instagram story of her. And I think she was performing like overseas. Like, I don't know where she was, but she was in a hospital where they weren't speaking English. And she was getting this huge, it looked terrifying, the rabies shot.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I'm glad she did it though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard it's brutal. But that just freaked me out when I saw that video because I can't even imagine what she was thinking when she saw that bat on her thigh. We're going to move on to the stories in the woods. So this is from an account called Search and Rescue Woods on Reddit. This is the actual username of this person.
Okay.
Just to give them credit. So this is like a 9-part series, okay? I read all of this about a week ago and it took me about 2 hours. So obviously we're only going to read part 1 and not even the entirety of part 1. I just took out sort of little segments of the creepiest parts. Now, is this a creepypasta? Probably. Are we sure? I don't know.
There could be a reality where this stuff existed, Jess.
Exactly.
It could be this one.
And that's the fun of it. So here we go. Put on your, I don't know what I was going to say. Put on your thinking caps, but you don't have to think about anything. You just have to listen.
I haven't had a thinking cap on for years.
Didn't teachers used to say that? Like, everybody sit down and put on your thinking caps like we were stupid before?
I've always been. The thinking cap never fixed anything.
Get comfortable. I'm going to put on my creepy voice, and we're going to go through some of these very creepy situations because this is about a man who worked as a search and rescue officer in a national forest in the States, and these are situations that he's been put on either to help people or to find someone who went missing.
I'm just excited to hear what this creepy voice is.
Well, it's not a creepy voice. It's just like a sort of relaxing voice, like you're listening to a story that you can fall asleep to.
You got to get your face closer to the mic, basically touching your entire face to it. Just start rubbing it all against. I'm just putting my beard right into it. For anybody who can hear that. Can you hear that?
I can hear that, yes.
See if I can just bury the whole microphone in it.
Let's not.
We're doing it. It's happening.
There's going to be hair sticking out of that now.
I actually think I dusted it off pretty well, but that worries me about what's in my beard now.
Yes. Here we go. So this is him narrating different situations he's been put in. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, and that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face.
I feel like this is describing me right now.
No. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid.
That's terrifying.
That's really terrifying. It almost sounds like a Sasquatch took him, to be honest.
Sam Squanch?
Yeah.
And that's why they had berries, just like as a bribe, just here, just shh.
Yeah. People think that like Bigfoot and Sasquatch is like not scary and kind of cute, but think about it if you're actually in the forest and see a big hairy thing on 2 feet that looks like a bear coming for you.
Yeah, it'd be terrifying. Put it plainly. So if there's something like a Sasquatch, you can assume it's maybe similar to, like, say, an ape, right?
Yeah.
Look at gorillas. A regular gorilla, silverback, whatever, walking around. I've seen videos of what gorillas do just to kind of tell you that, hey, your life is in my hands right now.
They stand up.
There was a video that I was watching, and it was just people on expedition, and the gorillas got a lot closer than they thought they would. The mother walked with the baby in between, and what they assumed to be the father was walking behind, just grabbed one of the guys and just started dragging him.
Oh, I've seen that video.
And you don't fight if that happens.
You play dead.
Yeah. The guy just dropped everything, froze, and got dragged about, I don't know, like 8 feet, but just arms up, just went with it, because the gorilla was basically saying, hey, I could snap you in half in an instant.
Yeah.
So Sasquatch, you can imagine, is probably about that size.
Or bigger.
Or bigger. That'd be terrifying. But this story implies that it could talk.
Right.
Yes, this
Creepy.
bear man.
Here's the next one. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name, before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could possibly have gone, because neither her mother or grandma saw her come down.
The tree ate her.
The tree ate her?
Yeah, just one big
gulp.
One big gulp. You ever see that scene in the extended edition of Lord of the Rings where Merry and Pippin get, like, swallowed by a tree?
Treebeard.
No, Treebeard didn't do that. Treebeard wouldn't do that.
Another Ent.
No, there was just another tree, just, you know, hung. Happens in the books, actually.
That reminds me of the rainforest tree.
There's a bunch of well, not as many as there used to be.
No, in the rainforest restaurant, the one that has a face and talks to you, it's terrifying.
You're talking about the Rainforest Cafe?
Yes. And the talking tree.
That's a throwback.
Yeah.
I never saw the talking tree. I always was scared of the gorilla animatronic because it was violent.
Well, animatronics in general are terrifying.
Yeah.
No one likes those things. Okay. Here we go. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured that he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he had fallen. He said he could hear that guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams.
That's terrifying.
You got to think, though, like, you must figure that these people are hallucinating.
Maybe.
Like, if they've been out for 2 days, they've had no food, no water, they're, like, infected. You got to assume that what they're saying is just nonsense, right? People see and hear weird things when they're out.
See, my first thought with that story is the guy was inconsolable because some guy just showed him up. Basically climbed this, whatever, treacherous
with
climb
no eyes.
with nothing.
No eyes, no less.
Yeah, on top of it, just no face.
Right.
Like, you hear when people say, look, ma, no hands, when riding a bike. This guy did basically, look, ma, no face.
Right.
Or they were just a victim of somebody who played the I got your nose game a little too much, but just took the whole thing. Never got it back.
All right. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack and was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, so we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at that scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she said that, I heard that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left that area that night.
A little terrifying.
Eerie! And that's the last one. And I love these stories, honestly. Like, forests scare me so much, and I never understand how these people, like the forest search and rescue, do it. Like, it must be terrifying. It must be draining to be searching for people. Like, in that sort of land, you know, up cliffs, in ravines, out for days with tents, and it's just terrifying.
Yeah, that's why I hide inside. At least if I get lost in my own house, at least it'll only take a few hours, maybe, to find me. But in a forest, I know that would take days.
So if you guys like this, we can, you know, do more of this series, because like I said, there's 9 parts. So if you want to hear more, definitely comment. But you can hear more on our Patreon when we talk about our personal experiences with not stuff like this, but missing people, stuff like that. We're gonna
I would say for the stories that I'm probably gonna tell, they're a lot less supernatural.
Right.
Definitely odd, definitely terrifying.
This probably went over 30 minutes just by a little bit, just because the first part of the video we were more so explaining what's been going on, but going forward they're gonna be about 30 minutes until September, and hopefully we reach our goal of 300 patrons, and we appreciate you guys and hope you have an awesome rest of your day. And Bandy should be back for the next couple episodes for sure, but we'll see.
Yeah,
and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you in our next podcast. Bye guys.
See you guys.